Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Wednesday morning's devotion. Now, still looking at a moon going behind the cloud down there. It's very early in the morning. It's an absolutely beautiful time of day. We're considering "Hallowed be Thy name," that aspect of the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples. We call it the Lord's Prayer. Probably better called the Disciples' Prayer. Jesus is teaching his disciples a pattern for prayer. Hallowed be thy name is the second statement. And yesterday we spoke about hallowed be thy name as a statement of submission to God. You see, when we understand the greatness and the magnitude of who God is and just his very personality, we should not have a problem submitting to him. Now, when we look at hallowed be thy name, we realize it's all about his glory. In Psalm 47, verse 8, it says this: God reigns over the nations. He is seated on his holy throne. And when you consider the word hallowed, hallowed be thy name. For some people, it's just like kind of like a statement of respect. It's like, oh, well, God save the Queen. It's like a statement of respect. It's like a cliche. Well, we all understand God is great. Well, let's hallow his name. And we tend to say it rather glibly and in a cliche sort of tone of voice. But God is a whole lot more than we would ever begin to understand or being able to comprehend. Just have a look. And I just want to throw three little examples out to you about people who came face to face with a holy God. And let's judge our response according to them as to how we should really behave in the presence of a holy God. I am nervous about the response that we sometimes have, and I see it in our churches today, where we kind of treat God like our best buddy. Hey, high fives for God, and let's give Jesus a clap, And I'm thinking, oh man, it just makes me just a little bit nervous, that we treat God with a sense of familiarity. Now, God is not the man upstairs. He's not the old boy over there. He is God. And when we understand it and experience God for who he is, we get a completely different picture of what our response should be. Have a look, first of all, at Moses in Exodus chapter 3, standing on holy ground. When God spoke to him on that mountain, Moses' face was in the floor and the burning bush was there. And at the sound of God's voice, Moses knew exactly what to do. He was on his face and he was down there in the presence of a holy God. And God said to him, Moses, take off your sandals. The place you stand is holy. It's not because God has some kind of ego, not an ego-driven God. He's just stating a fact. Where you stand is holy ground, Moses. And when you meet God like that, there's only one place for you. It's on your face. And then we see in Isaiah the same thing. Isaiah came to the temple as a routine thing, maybe in his vision, and he arrives in his vision at the temple, and he walks in as he probably always had, and suddenly he says, I saw the Lord. Oh my word. He was high, he was lifted up, and his train filled the temple, and the angels were crying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord. And if you could speak to Isaiah and say, so Isaiah, what did you do then? He would say, man, what could I do? I was on my face, and he declared, I am an unclean man with unclean lips, and I'm a part of an unclean generation. That's the true response to a God who is holy and whose name is to be hallowed. We stand on holy ground, not familiarity, no sort of clicheism as if we have to do this. But then my favorite would have to be Job. I love it. In Job 38, God speaks to Job after Job had been whining and complaining and talking to God. And even though he did that, it wasn't in sin. It was just in confusion and in his humanity. And God says to Job out of the storm, in chapter 40, he says, and chapter 38, he says, now, Job, let me ask you a few questions. You've asked me a lot of questions. Job, where were you when I created the foundation of the world? Job, where were you when I laid the boundaries for the ocean? Job, when were you when I set the stars in place? And for 2 chapters, God is going on at Job saying, Job, can you possibly comprehend me? Job, can you possibly understand my greatness? Can you possibly come even close to understanding the magnitude of who I am? And suddenly, Job in chapter 40 responds, he said, oh, God, forgive me. How arrogant that I should try and understand you. How arrogant that I should try and put you in a little box and I should try and comprehend you with my finite little mind. It's like an ant trying to understand how a D6 bulldozer works. I'll never comprehend you, Lord. You are way above me. I don't have the capacity. The best thing I can do is shut up. And he just said, I will put my hand over my mouth. I have nothing to say. You see, people, listen carefully. In the presence of a hallowed God, a God that the angels declare his holiness of, a God that all creation stands in awe of, I suggest we do the same thing. We stand on holy ground when we cry, hallowed be thy name. We're submitting to God. We're declaring his greatness, his goodness, and above all else, his glory. And that's what life is about. That's what prayer is about. That's what your purpose on this blooming planet is about, is to serve the purpose of God and to fulfill his plan to his glory. There is no other reason to live. If you're living for another reason, you better get with the program here, people. It's not about you. It's about a God who stands far above you. He is holy, and hallowed should be his name. Man, that's awesome. Let's go and have a great day now. Guys, we'll see you tomorrow. We do love you, you know. So cool to be here. Cheers.